The only variable in business that is infinitely scalable without any change in its quality is money. So whether I put a $1 bill in or a $100 bill in or $1,000 or 10,000 or a million or a billion or a gazillion, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change its property and it's infinitely scalable. Nothing else in business. But if you put money in the middle of your business model and make everything else subservient to it, then that urge for scale that money always brings with it will dictate the pace of everything else, and everything else will be subsumed underneath it. So if you don't make a deliberate decision to rein in that natural, expansive, endlessly scalable quality of money, you will end up destroying and breaking absolutely every other variable in the business.
You work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question. What has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling. I'm the business psychologist, the author of the 4-Week Vacation and the How to Hire the Best series, as well as the founder of Tap the Potential, where we coach entrepreneurs like you to design sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. Because after all, we believe work supports life, not the other way around. Weekly on the Profit by Design podcast, we bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire. Profit designers, we're doing it again. This is your chance to get up close and personal with me to support you in taking your life back from your business. Back by popular demand, Tap the Potential's Better Business, Better Life Jumpstart. Join me for this live closed-door Zoom experience over the course of 5 days. On day 1, we are diving into calculating the true profit potential that exists within your business. And then on days 2, 3, 4, and 5, I'm walking you through the steps of the Tap the Potential solution to show you how to tap in to that profit potential. We're going to be covering simplifying your business, freeing up your time, and being more profitable while you free up your time. And not only that, we're also going to be tackling the issue that so many of you are experiencing right now, and that is price pressure. You're being squeezed by inflation, and I want to show you how to raise your prices to not only cover inflation, but also to set yourself up to be able to grow and to hire that team of A players so that you can have more time for what matters most in your life. And then in the latter days, we will be looking at exactly that, hiring A players and growing your team. You are not going to want to miss this jumpstart. Head on over to tapthepotential.com/jumpstart. That's tapthepotential.com/jumpstart. Sign up, get your workbook, block the days on your calendar, and make sure you are there in person and you get to work directly with me, and I will walk you through these steps of the Tap the Potential solution so that you can be on the path to designing your sustainably profitable business that gives you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account. tapthepotential.com/jumpstart. I'll see you there. So welcome to the Profit by Design podcast. I am your host, Dr. Sabrina Starling. I'm the author of the How to Hire the Best series and my latest book, The 4-Week Vacation. I'm also the founder of Tap the Potential, where we believe work supports life, not the other way around. And we are on a mission to help entrepreneurs take your life back from your business. Today on the Profit by Design podcast, I am joined by a very special guest, Sir Steven Wilkinson. Sir Steven and I have had opportunity to work together on multiple occasions, although we have not seen each other face to face in 2.5 years now, I think, or over 2 years because of the pandemic. You are based in Ireland, Sir Steven, but I do understand you are out and about and traveling the world again. So hopefully we'll get to see each other. We're going to have a fabulous discussion today on the importance and the power of visioning for your life and for your business. And I wrote about visioning in the 4-Week Vacation book because in the years that I've been working with business owners, one of the biggest distinctions that I've noticed between business owners who really thrive and those who just continue to stay in the struggle is those who get to the point of thriving have a clear, compelling, vivid vision, not just for their business, but for their life. And they are able to describe in detail what they're wanting and what they're creating. Sir Steven reached out to me as he saw this coming out in my book, and he said, I have been working on this intense way of taking business owners through developing a vision. And I think what really stood out to me, Sir Steven, about what you shared with me is sometimes we come up with a vision and we don't really know. We have an idea of what we want in our business, but we don't really fully understand all the implications of that vision. And the way that you work with business owners around this process is you really help them look at all the implications to make sure, is this the vision that you really want? And if it's not, how to dig deep. And you are masterful at taking them through that process of digging deeper. So we're going to get into that today on the podcast and what that looks like. Some of the things that I want you to know about Sir Steven, he has pivoted just like all of us through COVID. And this process for him, his pivot actually started pre-COVID, but the shifts that COVID brought about have really helped you to pivot full circle in a different direction, and you're getting a lot more clarity. You are doing a lot more writing and consulting these days. You are in the role of being a critical thinking partner with business owners. And you said to me that you work with leaders of human scale business who are having some form of growth challenge. So let's just dive in right there. What do you mean by human scale business?
Yeah, I chose the word human scale or that description because I don't have time to work with people that I'm not aligned with on a values basis. And one of the things that fascinates me is intimacy in business. The businesses that I like working with and the business leaders that I like working with are all aligned around some higher purpose and understand, I'm going to call it very simply, the people part of the business as being absolutely essential and mean it. It's almost a truism or a cliche to say that our people are our most important assets. I don't think you will find anybody who wouldn't say or agree with that. But the question is, have they designed their business to reflect that really? And when push comes to shove, is it the people that come first, or is it the profits that come first, or something, or growth that comes first, or whatever else it is? So I've chosen that word human scale very deliberately because it means that the organizations are thinking very deliberately about the impact of growth on their culture, on the relationships, and on their ability to maintain that intimacy in their business relationships with suppliers, with customers, with their team that make for the sort of business that I want to be associated with. That simple.
Wow. Okay. What you're pointing out is that we really need to think through with the end in mind what we want and what are the impacts on if people are important to us and the relationships are important to us. What is the growth model that's going to support that? Or if it's profit and we're focused on that, there's a different way of growing the business. At Tap the Potential, one of the things that I have really focused on is how do you grow a business profitably so that it's life-giving for all involved?
There's a really interesting and simple heuristic that you can take to think about this. The only variable in business that is infinitely scalable without any change in its quality is money. So whether I put a $1 bill in or a $100 bill in or $1,000 or $10,000 or a million or a billion or a gazillion, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change its property and it's infinitely scalable. Nothing else is. Nothing else in business. Relationships aren't infinitely scalable. Quality isn't infinitely scalable. Production processes aren't infinitely scalable. Geography isn't infinitely scalable. Nothing else is. But if you put money in the middle of your business model and make everything else subservient to it, then that urge for scale that money always brings with it will dictate the pace of everything else, and everything else will be subsumed underneath it. So if you don't make a deliberate decision to rein in that natural, expansive, endlessly scalable quality of money, you will end up destroying and breaking absolutely every other variable in the business.
Yeah, so this is significant because our traditional way of thinking about entrepreneurship is grow, grow, grow. Like hustle culture is all about growth, grow the revenue. And when we focus in that direction, we lose the human side of the business, and the people in the business suffer. One of the diagrams that I brought that I want to share here is the survival trap image. And I think it really illustrates the point that you're making and why it's so important to think about what are we really after and what are we wanting to create with our businesses. I think most entrepreneurs can relate to the experience of every single day we are faced with thousands of decisions to be made. And every one of our decisions has implications for the business. And one of the best ways to grow a business and to grow a business that you love working in and your team loves working in is to make decisions that align with a vision for the business that supports the humans in the business. And so you want every decision to be aligned with that vision. So that's why you want to have that clear, compelling vision. The problem that we have is, number one, a lot of entrepreneurs don't have a clear, compelling, vivid vision. And the other problem is that a lot of the choices that we're faced with look like they're sort of aligned in the direction we want to go. But if we follow the trajectory out of that choice or that decision over time, it looks like it starts out in alignment towards the vision, but it can quickly get very far off track over time. And that's what you're talking about with respect to scaling, how quickly things can get off track and we miss the mark.
The scaling issue, now, admittedly, we both work in the SME or SMB space, and it's one that I'm very comfortable in, small business space or small and medium-sized business space. And we both know that not every business that we interact with has the problem of endless scalability of capital. That's not a problem that a lot of small businesses would recognize, and I can hear a lot of people saying, if only.
Right.
The other problem, the opposite of that problem, is what I call Groundhog Day. And Groundhog Day is when, you're getting up every day, you're doing exactly the same thing. You're getting smacked in the face exactly the same way. You end up in this sort of manic hamster wheel of doing exactly the same thing. And the only way to break out of that, and it might be growing, the wheel might be getting a little bit bigger, and Groundhog Day might be extended by half an hour every year. So you're getting 25 days of 25 hours in a month or in a day rather than 24 that you started with, but it looks exactly the same. And if you want that day to be different, if you want the series of days to be different, if you want to break out of the trap of Groundhog Day, then there's only one way to do it, and that's intentionally. And intention is thinking about how things ought to be different. And I'm not sure whether you are aware of one of the great economists of the last century, of the 20th century, an Austrian called Ludwig von Mises, who moved to New York in the 1940s and started writing and wrote probably the most brilliant treatise on economics called Human Action. And he laid down a very simple set of 3 conditions that needed to be fulfilled before people will take action. They had to be dissatisfied with the current state. They had to have a vision of what a different state might look like and a better one. And they had to believe that they themselves could affect the change to get there. And if one of those 3 conditions was missing, they would not act. They would just stay where they were and do what they do. And visioning or thinking about the future is not something that we're taught to do. In fact, as children, we're told quite the opposite. We're told to concentrate on what you're doing, what's in front of you, stop daydreaming, don't be silly, keep your feet on the ground, don't be unrealistic, all the things that we tell children to stop them from using their fantasy to imagine a different world. Now, often children are sitting there daydreaming. I certainly know I did most of the time at school. I have a very vivid imagination, and it was actually quite fun being in it. I was at an English boarding school and life there was not always happy. So staring out of the window and into the sky and just being in my fantasy was a great place to be. And we are taught through all sorts of different mechanisms that that's somehow irresponsible, impractical, stupid, not what grown-ups do, and so on. So we successively reduce our ability to imagine what the future is. Entrepreneurs fall into two categories as far as that is, very broadly. Of course, they have an aspirational idea of what the future can bring, otherwise they wouldn't start what they were doing. But they're never, often very extremely vague about what it looks like. And I saw a cartoon once, and I can't share it with you because I've just thought of it, of the two states of mind of an entrepreneur. There's sort of at the bottom of the graph, there's hard work, sweat, blood, toil, and tears. And then there's this fantastic state where you're in your yacht and you're looking over the Florida coastline and you've got a glass of champagne in your hand. And those are the only two states that are acknowledged. And you spend all of your life as an entrepreneur in that sort of blood, sweat, and toil state. And your vision is, well, something's going to happen, because why would I be doing all this that's going to see me on my yacht with my glass of champagne and my fishing rod in my hand off the Florida coast in my boat? And I think it's that state, that fantasy, that one day that has to be the result, because otherwise why would I be doing this, that keeps a lot of entrepreneurs in motion. But it's not a vision. That's the sort of the fantasy of somebody who's in prison and dreaming of what life might be like in a different state.
So that's a powerful statement. That's the fantasy of someone in prison dreaming of what life would be like in a different state. So how do we get to really visioning?
I have had two great influences in this health visioning process. And one of them came from the Small Giants, one of the original Small Giants. I'm probably going to say the original inspiration for the Small Giants book, a man called Ari Weinzweig, who is one of the founding partners of Zingerman's in Ann Arbor. And I'm sure you've heard of it, and I'm sure lots of other people have as well. The famous deli, President Obama visited it when he was in Ann Arbor and had one of their famous Reuben sandwiches, which are probably the most expensive sandwiches in the world. I think it clocks in at something like $18.75, but it's worth it. A sandwich for which you probably need building permission or planning permission is got to be worth $18 or almost 20. But Ari runs his business with his partner and has, through the years, developed the technique of visioning and uses it as the core change management instrument in his business. And he teaches it, and I learned it from him about 12, 13 years ago. That was the one influence. And I've considerably adapted and adopted that particular model, and it forms the core of the work I do with visioning, supplemented with a few other things. The other person who was a great influence, although I didn't know it at the time, was my grandmother, who was very eccentric. And she used to have this saying, which was, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else, which I just thought was silly. It just didn't mean anything until I realized that you would only know if you were somewhere else if that somewhere else wasn't what you actually want, where you actually wanted to be. And that meant that inside of you, you do know where you want to go. You just don't know how to articulate it. Because if you did articulate it, you could then be precise about your intention and then do things that conform with that intention rather than doing things that lead you in a different direction. Most people tend not to be going in completely the wrong direction. They're sort of going vaguely in the right direction. I grew up in a sailing household, and one of the things my father told me very early on was when we were sort of, when I was given the tiller and was told to keep on a bearing of 275 degrees, he would say, it's important to keep your eye on the compass and to follow the bearing, because over time and distance, 1 degree turns into hundreds of miles off course. That if you go 1 degree, start in England and want to sail to New York, and you're 1 degree off course, by the time you've crossed the Atlantic, you're in Brazil, which gives you an idea of how far over time you can drift off course. If you don't know where you're going, you just want to get to the American continent somehow, then Brazil is fine, even if you had a vague idea that you wanted to go to New York. But if you do want to go to New York and you need to be in New York, then you need to set the course. And you need to keep your eye on it every single day, which of course you will do if you've already stated your intention. And I think that red dotted line is much closer to the real experience of entrepreneurs. Maybe the dotted line should be below the full focus because it's sort of a downward, it's never as good as it could be if you're not intentional. And I think the most important word in the whole visioning is intention. What do you actually want?
The power of intention and coming back to it every day. I have a saying, small steps forward, taken in a consistent direction, lead to big change in a relatively short period of time. And what's behind that, what fuels that change, is the power of intention. And intention comes through not just in our choices, but it comes through in our very, very being. And others around us respond to our intention. And so even if we're not face to face, if I came into this interview with an intention that we're going to make a lot of money here somehow through this interview, that's a very different intention than I want to bring some information here that's going to support entrepreneurs. We're going to teach, share, educate, enlighten. That's what we do here on the Profit by Design podcast. That's the intention. And people respond to that intention. Even the way that you show up and engage with me here in the conversation is based around that intention that we both hold, that we want to share and support other entrepreneurs in learning.
And the vision is the intention to break out of Groundhog Day. And because Groundhog Day is a state, and because the vision is a different state that hopefully is inspiring and exciting for you when you think about it, challenging, gets your sort of energy and adrenaline going, it is at heart a change management document. It is starting with the end in mind, to quote Stephen Covey, and to saying, where do I want to be, or what do I want to be different? Which is where it starts becoming really interesting as a leadership tool, because the power of a vision is its specificity. It's not an aspirational, vague document. The more specific you can be about your intention, the more amazing things happen. Because I'm teaching my grandmother to suck eggs because you've studied psychology, you're a doctor of psychology, you know this probably better than I do. Our consciousness is not able to distinguish between past, present, and future. It just is. And by stating, one of the ways to trick yourself into actually believing your vision is to formulate it in detail, in a narrative form, in the present tense. So you're writing as if all these things have already happened. And that means you have to be specific about the time in the future that you are writing. So very, very first part of the visioning exercise is always to determine the point in time at which we are visioning. And I don't know whether we've got time to go into that, but there are certain things that determine how far out into the future you can go.
Well, let's actually get into that, because that's one of the first questions that comes up for entrepreneurs is, how far out should I vision?
Okay, then the way that you do that is you grade yourself 0 to 10 on 5 basic criteria. And think of it like a crane. Every crane can only stretch as far as it's weighted on the base. So the heavier the base, the further out I can go, depending on how tall, because it's fulcrum. So what determines the weight of the base of a business? And it's the following, I think. Number one, it is your understanding of the value that you're bringing to the marketplace. What transformation do I want to achieve with my clients? If I'm not really sure what I'm doing, and I'm not really sure who my clients are, and I don't really know what the transformation is, or it could be lots of different things, that vagueness does not translate well into future specificity. Number one. Number two, the age of the business. If I've just started, I have a completely different base weight in terms of my understanding of the volatility of outcomes. In other words, it could be amazing or it could be a complete disaster within a month. If I've got a 20-year-old business, or I'm working at the moment with a 50-year-old business, the range of outcomes is much tighter. So if I'm extending that out into the future, I can afford to go out much further because it's not going to change that much on a month-to-month or quarter-to-quarter basis. And if I really want to change something substantial, it's going to take time to do it. That's the second thing. The third thing is how well I understand my business model. Do I really know what effects change within the financial structure of my model? So my input variables and my outputs. So do I really understand what is determining the financial model at the heart of the business? If I don't, then it's very difficult to extrapolate it into the future, because the mistakes that I'm making on a compound basis over time will be so enormous as to render my model worthless. You're constantly looking to narrow in on an outcome that has a pretty high probability of you being able to reach it. It's got to be strategically anchored. So the third thing. The fourth thing is your strategic focus, which is sort of aligned to the first one, which is, do you know what your transformation is? But the more focused you are, and I know you are an expert in pumpkin planning, well, the clearer your pumpkin plan is, the better you will be able to marshal your resources and then think, well, if I apply this strategy and that's the outcome I'm looking for, what does that look like in the future? What happens if I do that for 3, 5, 7 years? So your transformation in your marketplace and your sort of customer value and your strategy are very closely linked together, and they're both tied into the business model.
As you're talking, I want to add the sweet spot diagram here on the screen for us, because that's the heart of pumpkin planning. And this is what you're talking about, is understanding, a deep understanding of the sweet spot of our business makes that stronger foundation.
Yeah.
So the sweet spot of the business is the intersection of your top clients, your unique offering, and this is the value that you add to the marketplace. This is why when you talk about Zingerman's and the $18 sandwich, they know the value that's there that they've created, and that's why they are able to charge that for that sandwich. There's all kinds of other things packed into that sandwich beyond just a sandwich. And the other part of the sweet spot is the systems, how you are delivering that unique offering to your clients. So when that is tight, that's that stronger base that you're talking about.
Yeah. And the systemization is what allows you to scale and allows you to duplicate, because you understand how your system works. So in systems and business model are part of the same thing. Maybe I'll add systems to the base weight. And the final one in my estimation of what contributes to base weight is the level of enthusiasm that the entrepreneur brings to it. If you are passionate about what you're doing, and we both know one particular entrepreneur whose business model understanding is still in a very early stage, but is deeply passionate about what he is intending to do and the transformation he's looking for. And his enthusiasm adds a great deal to that base weight. So if you score yourself on those 5 or 6 points, and let's take my 5 and add your systemization from the pumpkin plan sweet spot, then you've got, and just grade yourself, then the higher the number, the further out you can go. It's that simple.
Got it.
If you're just starting, you don't really know your business model, you're not quite sure what, then extending it out 18 months is already about as far as you should be going, because that will give you the focus and the concentration to get to that critical next stage when you're then suddenly a year and a half or 2 years old. And, then you can afford to go a little bit further because you've refined your knowledge around all those aspects.
That's right. So this is where we're constantly learning, and our business can only go as far as we learn and grow and develop ourselves as the entrepreneur, because our own learning limits our vision. And the more we learn, the greater the vision we can have. And the analogy that has always really resonated for me is, I used to live in Wyoming, and the Teton Mountains or the Wind River Range, whichever one. And I would start driving and I would look at the mountain range and I would say, okay, I think I'm going to head out this way. And the mountains are kind of vague and fuzzy, and there's clouds in front of them, so you can't really see them. But the further you drive, the more clear they become and the more detail you can see. And I really equate this to our entrepreneurial journey. When we're just starting out, we have these vague ideas of what we want. And the further we go on the journey, we start to see, there's some definition here. There's shapes, there's trees, there's, rivers, and I want to go this direction. This is the destination that I want. But we're not able to claim that destination until we're able to see with a little more clarity of what's really out there and what's possible. And what I'm fascinated by, Sir Steven, is what we don't know that we don't know, especially when it comes to what's really possible, what can be created. And I think we limit our visions sometimes.
Absolutely. And there are two things that I have to do during every visioning process. everyone, to various degrees. Number one is to smack people on the fingers when they start asking, how do I do that? How do we do that? I can't do that. Because the operational questions around how to do something are the most limiting factors in designing a vision. Forget the how. Just forget it.
As soon as we say, I don't know how, we stop our creativity.
We stop our creativity. And so the only thing that you should be interested in is where. Where are we going? What does it look like when we get to this particular point? And we started off by saying that the very beginning of every visioning session is a determination of the point in time that we are actually visioning. So is it 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? Is it an anniversary? And then to be very specific about what you are doing as you are visioning. Because it's okay to say we're going to go 5 years out, but we're now 18th of May. 5 years, the 18th of May is 2027, 18th of May. What are you doing on the 18th of May or sometime in that year that is so powerful as an image for you? And maybe it's your 10th anniversary of the business. Maybe it's a Christmas party. Maybe it could be anything. But you have to put yourself in a very specific situation and then decide, am I giving a speech? Am I writing in a journal? Am I talking to my partner? Am I talking to my leadership team? You have to create a scenario and make it easy for yourself to actually be in that future. Because if you're just trying to do it without any external references whatsoever, as a sort of academic exercise, it loses a lot of its coherence and its energy. And at the end of the day, what you are doing, and I'm going to get a little bit esoteric here, is you are extending your consciousness into the future. You are planting an anchor in the future, and then you are letting your energy flow between where you are now and that intentional point in the future. And it's that energy that makes all the other options disappear. The clearer the tension, or the stronger the tension between where you want to go and where you are now, it works exactly the same principles in electric current. The current needs tension, and it needs a very specific point. It needs a positive and a negative. And in order for 800 or 1,000 volts to flow, there needs to be a big, clear metal object at the other end to tie the energy flow between here and there. And that's exactly what you're doing. You are banging in the positive pole from your negative future, negative present. I'm just using negative and positive in a sort of technical term, but we'll leave it at that because negative means I'm looking at all the things that are wrong today, things that I'm not happy about, that could be better, and I'm turning them into positive outcomes and condensing those so that my work energy and my mental energy can flow towards that point and not get dissipated in all the other possible options that might describe my future. And in the original, and I'll finish the sentence in a second, or my ramble in a second, the original work in organizational psychology was done by a gentleman called Ron Lippitt at the University of Michigan in the organizational psychology department. And he referred to the work that he was doing as preferred futuring. He didn't call it visioning. Visioning was something that came out much later. He called it preferred futuring. And there's something very powerful about that because of all the different futures that are out there, in 5 years, you're going to end up somewhere. We all reach that time continuum. And if you don't, then it's moot anyway. But we're all going to get there. And either you're going to be, it's going to be a broken business that gets there, or it's going to be a healthy, vibrant one. Which one do you prefer? Which of all the millions of futures? Just pick one. And it's got to be one that is inspiring and exciting for you and your team, and it has to be strategically sound. And finding the point between strategic soundness and inspiration is where you're maximizing the tension between present and future.
Say that again, because that's really powerful. Say that last statement.
Getting the point right between strategically sound, which is, does the business model work? Is it sensible within the context of your market and the time and so on? Getting the point right between strategically sound and maximally inspiring. If you do that and get the time right for your business, that's when you maximize the efficiency of the energy flow between today and then. If you make it too inspiring, that it's no longer strategically sound, then all the energy dissipates because you don't believe it either. It disappears into the realm of fantasy. If you make it too strategically sound, it doesn't have that charge of emotional excitement that makes you want to get there. So finding that sort of space, that tension between those two aspects is absolutely critical, and steering it so that you're just touching the sort of outer bound of the inspirational constraint without leaving the strategic soundness. That's what makes the vision great.
Yeah. So the strategic soundness is the piece where it's grounded enough in reality that you hear it and those you share it with hear it, and they can say, I don't necessarily know how we're going to achieve this, but I can see that it's possible. And then you add that emotional charge to it because of the inspiration. And that's what that creates that pull, is it's believable and it's highly inspiring. And what I'm fascinated about in our human nature is as soon as we put something out there that we really want and we believe it's possible, and we share it with others and they hear it and get excited about it and inspired by it, it immediately creates this gap. And our mind unconsciously and consciously, but a lot of it is unconscious, I believe, will go to work on finding the how, all the ways to bring that vision to fruition. And in my experience, a lot of times the resources that come forth and the people who come forth who are going to help us achieve this vision, to realize, and realize itself is an interesting word. When you say realize a vision, you're bringing it into reality, you're turning it real. And the people and the resources that come forward, that show up, because we're holding that vision clearly in our mind's eye, we will see those people and resources around us. When we don't have that vision, when it's vague and fuzzy, not clearly articulated, we'll miss those opportunities. We won't even see them.
I think there are two aspects to that, and I can validate it 100% with the experience that I've had working with leaders who go on a visioning journey with me or with anybody else. If it's done properly and it has that charge, then what you are doing is you're sending out a frequency, and that frequency resonates and it will attract. Anybody who's interested in the law of attraction can understand why that should be. Firstly. Secondly, the vision tells you what you are not going to do.
Oh, that's so
And so much of our energy is wasted trying to figure out whether something is worth pursuing or not. That takes our mind off where we want, or we say we want to go. And the vision, if it's done properly, is really simple, because if it's not in the vision, we don't do it. Move on. The amount of energy that you save not processing stuff that really has no business capturing your attention is enormous. And all of that non-wasted energy that you were otherwise leaching out every day, looking sort of left and right, is available for the actual business that you've committed to. And what I've found is that people who've published the vision, who've actually come out and finished it and it's in documented form and it's printed and published and shared with their team and with their community, they suddenly say, it's amazing how people are now acting as though that reality was already there, thereby creating the reality that you put into the future. And I keep seeing that again and again and again, because once you've told people where we're going and they get it and they buy into it and they're just as inspired, well, then that becomes the reality. It just becomes it, because we can't hold two different realities in our head at the same time. And all they are seeing is today's actions feeding into that desired future state. And it's incredibly powerful.
I want to bring in the aspect of team in relation to vision, because one of the challenges that I hear from entrepreneurs is, I can't trust my team to make decisions in my absence. I'm convinced that when we have this clear, compelling, vivid vision that has been articulated repeatedly to the team, so you can't just say it once and you're done. The vision has to live. You have to continually come back to it, talk about it, keep it in existence in everyone's mind's eye and in their being. And when team members are faced with situations and choices that come up, understanding the business vision is critical to helping them make better decisions in the business, particularly when the owner is not around. And if we want to get to the point where our businesses don't depend on us being there every single day, one of the must-haves, there's several must-haves, but one of the must-haves is this clear, compelling, vivid vision, because it really is the roadmap for the team when we're not physically present.
Would you like me to talk a little bit about how you get to the final, how you actually get to the final vision and make sure that it's not just yours as a leader, but that it becomes everybody's vision? If you imagine the entrepreneur as the owner of the business, has to be the starting point. They have to be the starting point for the vision. It's a non-delegable leadership challenge, is to create the starting point for the vision. So they create the first draft. And through the entire visioning process, every single paper that is produced for the vision has to have the word draft over the top. So people realize this is work in progress. And it then goes out in concentric circles. So the leader starts, maximum 2 people, if it's a leadership team of 2, then, but somebody's got to take the initiative, and they tend to be the person to create that first draft. You then take it out like a starter for a sourdough, and you then take it into the next level of management. And at some stage, usually after that first inclusion, when you've shared it with everybody, got everybody's individual feedback, you then take it into the organization, still with draft over the top. This time it's, by the time it gets into the organization, let's say you've got an organization with 100 people, and you have a leadership partnership of 2, and then you've got a leadership team of maybe 8, and then you've got a sort of next layer of either regional or divisional managers. Well, what you would do is you would start off with 1 or 2, create a draft document, could be anywhere from 8 to 20 pages of descriptive prose of what the business looks like in all the various aspects that the partners think are important. They will then take it to their leadership team, do exactly the same exercise with them individually and then as a group, discussing what that future looks like and saying, well, actually, that doesn't make much sense, because if we do that, then we have to give up that, or we have to have that as well. And people say, yeah, you're quite right, hadn't thought of that. And then other people will see that there are glaring gaps in the vision. We haven't even begun to talk about our charitable donations or how we're going to manage our mental health or whatever it is. Mental health issues and wellness, and everybody has their own perspective. They then bring it in and discuss it, and then you get sort of leadership draft. And then depending on how the business is organized, you take slice teams from the organization. So you're not just getting the manufacturing or the people in Denver or silos, you're getting cross sections, putting them in workshops, giving them the opportunity to read, discuss, and bring their own aspects in. So by the time you've finished, and you can sort of tell this is a 3 to 6 month process, depending on the size of the organization. By the time you've finished, everybody has had a chance to input into the vision. And it's really important at that stage, at that final stage, to capture the individual vocabulary and ideas of the people in the team so they can see themselves. It's like when we go through a yearbook, the first page we go to is the page that we're on. Oh, look, there's me.
Of course.
And so people need to see that words that they've used and the ideas, that concepts that they've brought have been reflected. Not all of them, but you will usually find that, after a very short amount of time, you've got a fairly good consensus. And then when you've got that document, you've finished it as a draft, you then take it to selected members of your community. Maybe your banker, maybe one of your key clients, maybe a mentor, maybe a supplier who's known you for a long time. People who have your very best interests at heart and whom you trust, not to rain on your parade, and who can take this very sensitive document for what it is, which is a gift to them. This is how we see the future. What do you think? Get that external validation, and then the document goes into its final production. So everybody's been sort of thinking about this for a few months. I have now come to the conclusion that printing it is a really good idea, and not just on a printer in the office, but actually having it designed and turned into a little book. And I'm working with a friend in New York who has a small publishing business, and she's done some amazing work around actually publishing a small batch run of hard copy versions, because then when you've done all that, you have to celebrate it. And the celebration is firstly marking the end of the project and the beginning of the visioning work. So this is the future starts now, firstly. Secondly, by having some merchandise around the vision, caps, t-shirts, posters, you are manifesting it in a way that is permanently visible. You, as you said at the beginning, you have to make sure it's always there. And if the book is well produced, people will want to share it. They will want to take it home to their parents or to their spouses and say, this is what I've been working on. Isn't this amazing?
Yeah, it's the look here, it's me, kind of like the yearbook, but look here, it's me, and here's the vision that we have. I'm a part of it.
This is this amazing company I work for. Yeah, and I'm a part of this. And once that is done, you've got everybody's buy-in, you've externalized it, you've published it, you've celebrated it, and you've manifested it. Then you have all the ingredients for the change management program, because within that vision are chapters, and the chapters consist of projects, and the projects consist of timelines. So the whole thing becomes a program of change over the period that you've described in order to get to that final result. Now, there might be, the company may have this hideous word, a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And that BHAG could be behind the visioning time. It doesn't have to be congruent with the visioning point. It can be behind it, but you're well on the way to achieving it, or you're some way to achieving it. And the next visioning after that can take you to the BHAG, or you can move your BHAG, whatever it is. So, but the most important thing is that vision itself is a change management document. It is telling everybody, this is where we want to end up. And now we've got the projects, we've identified the areas in which we want to make those changes. And now we start figuring out how to get to the next state, not the end state, but the next state, whatever that is. And then you're working in quarterly or half yearly or annual increments of projects and goals and things, but you're doing it all with a very clear intention.
I love how you've brought this full circle with respect to the vision being, and you use the word document, a change management document. I actually hear it's a change management tool and strategy. So it's not just you sit down and you create a vision, but you've really walked us through how do you create a vision that other stakeholders are going to connect with and buy into and want to be a part of and want to support bringing it into fruition. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who the first time they create a vision, it feels very personal and we're scared to share it. And it's like, oh. And so I love the process that you've laid out, because it's a safer way to start getting it out there in these stages with these different groups of people where you're getting feedback, and it's always in draft mode. So, as soon as we say something's a draft, it takes away that feeling of it has to be just right before we share it. And it makes it easier to share and get feedback.
I believe this process is impossible to do by yourself. My experience of visioning is that every vision hits a wall at some stage in the first 6 to 8 weeks. And it's either because there's been some design fault in the vision itself, it's too far in the future, it's not exciting enough, and most people do not know how to get over that wall by themselves. I'm all for people doing things by themselves, and this is not you need to work with a consultant, but I'm telling you, you need to work with a consultant. You need to have somebody to coach you through this process, because otherwise at the critical points, either 3 to 4 to 5 weeks in, or in the drafting, you get bored of the drafting. And it's only in the drafting when you're pushing the vision into that ideal space between strategically sound and maximally inspiring. You can't do that by yourself. I've never seen anybody really do project as complex as this all by themselves. It just, you get bored and life happens, and unless you keep the momentum going, it just dies a horrible death. Or you end up with a document that is neither inspiring or strategically sound.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. So I said at the beginning, this is going to be a fascinating discussion. It's illuminating. We've had a lot of viewers watching. We've had people, Don Zerby, Steve Bousquet are with us. A Facebook user, it doesn't show me their name, they said, what not to do may be the most important energy saving concept. So, Sir Steven, I greatly appreciate you joining me here today so we could have this discussion. What's the best way for someone to get in contact with you at your company, Good and Prosper?
Steven at goodandprosper.com is a good place, always open for information. LinkedIn, I've started using last summer, and I'm not very good at it, but at least I'm there fairly regularly. And those are probably the two best places to get hold of me.
Well, thank you for being with us, Sir Steven, and thank you for those who listened to us live today and participated with your feedback. A great discussion.
Thank you. Always fun with you, Dr. Sabrina. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Join our conversation in the Entrepreneurs Take Your Life Back Facebook community at tapthepotential.com/group. Share your aha moments from today's episode, ask me questions, and join in on the fun with your fellow entrepreneurs on the journey to designing sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. And finally, share today's episode with a friend if you know a friend who would enjoy it. This is real life business. Keep your chin up, keep moving forward. You got this.